Dear students, today we begin a powerful journey into one of the most inspiring chapters of India's history. The name of the chapter is The Rise of Gandhi and the Freedom Movement of India. This is the second chapter from your class 10 history textbook of social science, and it is not just about dates and events. It is the story of how ordinary people under extraordinary leadership challenged one of the biggest empires in the world. How a simple man in a white dhoti inspired millions to stand up against a mighty empire. Through this chapter, we will discover how Mahatma Gandhi's ideas and leadership transformed our freedom struggle, and how every Indian, from farmers to students to factory workers and leaders, played their part in the fight for Swaraj, our own rule. So grab your notebooks and let's begin. Before we dive deeper, let's take a quick look at the key points we will cover in this chapter. First, we begin with the rise of Gandhi. In the year 1915, Mahatma Gandhi returned to India from South Africa. Next, we will explore the beginning of the non-violence movement, also called the Satyagraha movement, which started around 1917 and continued to grow. This was a time when India started to experiment with peaceful protest, and the results were very powerful. And then we will learn about the first big national movement under Gandhi's leadership, the non-cooperation movement, which took place between 1920 and 22. This was a turning point where people all across India decided we will not cooperate with British rule anymore. After the non-cooperation movement, India's fight for independence grew even stronger. In 1930, the country launched the civil disobedience movement, a bold step where Indians openly broke unfair British laws. It was during this time that Gandhi led the famous Dandi March protesting the British salt tax. Then came the launch of the Quit India movement in 1942. This was when Mahatma Gandhi gave the powerful slogan, "Do or die," and demanded that the British leave India immediately. But the struggle wasn't just happening inside India. Outside the country, a brave leader named Subhash Chandra Bose formed the Indian National Army in 1942. By 1943, he took command and inspired Indians with his passionate call, "Give me blood and I will give you freedom." Finally, after years of sacrifices, protest, and unity, came the biggest moment of all, the passing of the Indian Independence Act in 1947. India was finally free. All of these events brought us one step closer to independence, and together they form the unforgettable story of India's freedom struggle. Let's begin the first major section of our chapter, the rise of Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi's arrival in Indian politics was a turning point in the freedom struggle. He returned to India in 1915, just after World War I had begun in 1914. As we all know, World War I was a global war between two powerful groups, the Allied powers like Britain and France, and the Central powers like Germany and Austria. It caused massive destruction and involved many countries across Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Allied powers, including Britain, promised democracy and self-rule to countries like India if they supported the war. So many Indian leaders supported Britain, hoping India would get freedom later. But when the British won in 1918, they did not fulfill their promise. This caused disappointment and growing anger among Indians. After World War I, people across the world were demanding freedom and democracy. This global mood also inspired nationalist feelings in India. One major influence was the Russian Revolution of 1917. It showed that ordinary people had the power to bring big changes. The Russian Revolution was when the people of Russia overthrew their king, called the Tsar, and established a government led by workers and peasants. The Russian people overthrew a powerful monarchy through unity and struggle. This gave hope to Indian nationalists. They started believing that mass movements could defeat British rule too. So the global events, especially Russia's revolution, helped set the stage for Gandhi's rise in the Indian freedom movement. Let's look at how Mahatma Gandhi's journey began. He was born on 2nd October 1869 in Porbandar, Gujarat, into a respected family. In 1888, he went to England to study law and returned to India in 1891 as a barrister. He tried to practice law in Rajkot and Bombay but didn't find much success. Then in 1893, he went to South Africa to work for a legal case. There, Gandhi faced shocking racial discrimination. There, Indians were treated badly by Europeans. They could not travel freely, vote, or even sit with whites in trains. This experience deeply impacted Gandhi and shaped his ideas of justice and resistance. Let's now see how Gandhi turned into a political leader in South Africa. He began actively opposing racist laws that Indians were forced to follow. Racial discrimination meant that Indians were treated as inferior. They could not travel in first class compartment, vote in elections, or even walk on certain streets meant only for white people. To organize Indians politically, he formed the Natal Indian Congress. To spread awareness, he started a newspaper called Indian Opinion. He used non-violent resistance, which later became known as Satyagraha for the first time. One major protest was against a law that banned Indians from entering the Transvaal province. Another important issue Gandhi fought was about Indian marriages. The British court had ruled that only marriages done under Christian rituals were valid. This meant most Hindu and Muslim marriages were not legally accepted. Gandhi strongly opposed this injustice to Indian culture and tradition. Because of this protest, Gandhi was arrested and jailed for 9 months. But finally, a compromise law called the Indian Relief Act was passed and he was released. This struggle laid the foundation for his future fight for justice in India. Now let's talk about one of Gandhi's most powerful ideas, Satyagraha. It was in South Africa that Gandhi first coined this term. It comes from two Sanskrit words, Satya, which means truth, and Agraha, which means firmness or insistence. So Satyagraha means holding on to truth. But it wasn't just about truth. It was a bold, active method of protest but without any violence. Unlike passive resistance, Satyagraha encouraged people to fight injustice actively but with peace, courage, and truth as their weapons. In shaping this idea, Gandhi was influenced by great thinkers like Leo Tolstoy, a Russian writer who believed in non-violence and love for all, and Henry David Thoreau, an American philosopher known for the idea of civil disobedience, peacefully refusing to obey unjust laws. Satyagraha became the soul of India's freedom movement, a new way to resist without hatred. After years of struggle in South Africa, Gandhi returned to India in 1915, not just as a lawyer, but a mature and idealistic leader. But he didn't jump straight into national politics. Instead, he started by helping people in local struggles, and that's where his leadership truly began to shine. Let's look at three important early movements led by Gandhi. Samparan in Bihar, 1917. He supported poor farmers who were forced by British planters to grow indigo under harsh conditions. Second, Ahmedabad in Gujarat, 1918. He helped mill workers in a fight to get fair wages. Third, Kheda in Gujarat, 1918. He led a protest against the collection of land tax during a time of famine when people had no food, let alone money. In all three cases, Gandhi used the same tools: truth, non-violence, and mass mobilization. He believed that the real strength of politics lies in the hands of common people, not in big speeches or violence. His success in these early campaigns made people trust him and helped Gandhi emerge as a national leader. These small beginnings would soon lead to a massive national movement. When World War I broke out in 1914, Gandhi supported the British government. Why? Because he believed that if Indians showed loyalty to the British during the war, they would be rewarded with Swaraj or self-rule after the war. In fact, Gandhi even urged peasants from Gujarat to join the British army and show their support. So until 1918, Gandhi was seen as a cooperator of British rule, someone who believed in working within the system. But these things changed after the war. By 1919, Gandhi had become completely disillusioned. British made no move towards granting self-rule. Instead, they introduced harsh laws like the Rowlatt Act and crushed peaceful protests with violence. Gandhi realized that cooperating with colonial rulers would never bring true freedom. This marked a major turning point. He shifted from being a cooperator to becoming a non-cooperator. This sense laid the foundation for future mass movements like the non-cooperation movement. It was a bold step that changed the course of India's freedom struggle forever. After World War I, from 1914 to 1918, India faced a severe economic crisis. Indian industries suffered losses and closures. Workers faced unemployment, poverty, and high inflation or price rise. Farmers struggled under heavy taxation and worsening poverty, and educated Indians in cities could not find jobs. This harsh condition impacted all sections of Indian society, leading to unrest and demand for change. Now we will look at the Rowlatt Act and how it affected India. The Rowlatt Act was passed by the British in 1919 to suppress Indian political voices. It was widely opposed and came to be known as the Black Act by Indians. In 1917, Governor General Lord Chelmsford appointed a committee to examine revolutionary activities in India. The committee was chaired by Justice Sidney Rowlatt. Objective of the committee was to investigate the nature and extent of revolutionary activities, also to suggest suitable legislation to control them. In 1919, the British passed the Rowlatt Act based on the committee's report. This law gave the government special powers such as arresting and jailing people without a trial, no lawyer, no court, no hearing allowed. In simple words, a person could be jailed without any charges and without a chance to defend themselves. The Rowlatt Act came as a rude shock to Indians. People saw it as a betrayal of the promise made during World War I. It felt like a direct attack on civil rights. Indian leaders and the public strongly opposed the act, and they felt cheated after supporting the British in the war. In response to the Rowlatt Act, Gandhi launched a nationwide Satyagraha in 1919. It was a peaceful protest based on truth and non-violence. In protest against the Rowlatt Act, Gandhi launched the Satyagraha movement on April 6, 1919. He saw it not just as political resistance, but as a moral and spiritual movement, a way of purification and penance. So people were urged to suspend all work and business, fast and pray as peaceful protest, and participate in a nationwide hartal or strike. The movement was meant to be completely non-violent and disciplined. The movement gradually turned into a mass movement across India. More and more people joined in, showing their support for Gandhi's call for non-violence. Gandhi emerged as an all-India leader, respected not just politically, but also admired for his moral influence. But the British government did not take this lightly. They responded with strict repression. Gandhi was arrested, although he was later released. Still, the movement was brutally crushed by the government. Now, let's look at one of the most tragic and unforgettable events in the India's freedom struggle, the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, which shocked the entire nation on April 13, 1919. After the nationwide hartal on 6 April, tension rose sharply in Punjab. Just a few days later, on April 10, 1919, two respected local leaders, Dr. Satyapal and Dr. Saifuddin Kisliu, were arrested and deported from Amritsar. Their arrest caused public outrage, setting the stage for a tragic event that would shake the nation, the massacre at Jallianwala Bagh. On April 13, 1919, thousands of people gathered peacefully at Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar. The garden where they protested, enclosed by high walls and with only one narrow entrance, soon became a trap. Without any warning, General Dyer ordered his troops to open fire on the unarmed crowd. There was no escape. Hundreds of innocent people were killed and many more left wounded. The massacre at Jallianwala Bagh sent shockwave throughout the country. In the days that followed, the British government imposed martial law in Punjab. This meant strict military rule. Many people were arrested without reason, properties were taken away, and innocent civilians were beaten and humiliated in public. To address the public outcry, a committee of inquiry was set up under Lord Hunter. General Dyer, the man responsible for the massacre, was removed from active service when he returned to London. But he was not punished. This lack of justice created anger and frustration all over India. One of the strongest responses came from Rabindranath Tagore, the famous poet and Nobel laureate. He renounced his knighthood, a special honor the British had given him as a mark of protest. So, knighthood is one of the oldest honors in the British system. It began in medieval times, where knights were warriors serving the king. Over time, it became a ceremonial title awarded to men and women called dames for outstanding service in fields like art, literature, science, public service, or royalty to the British Empire. It was mainly given to British citizens, but during colonial times, some Indians and people from other colonies were also awarded knighthood by the British Crown, usually for their loyalty, contributions to British rule, or excellence in certain fields. The massacre shocked the whole country. It made people more united and serious about fighting for freedom. From that moment, the movement was not just about rights, it was about self-respect and full independence. Now we will look at the Khilafat movement of 1919. It was launched by Indian Muslims to protect the Caliph of Turkey, and Gandhiji supported it to unite Hindus and Muslims against the British rule. After Turkey's defeat in World War I, the power of the Khalifa, the spiritual leader of Muslims, was weakened. A caliph or khalifa is seen as the religious and political head of the global Muslim community. The caliphate is the system of Islamic rule led by the caliph, a symbol of unity for Muslims across countries. Indian Muslims were deeply concerned. They feared that the Sultan of Turkey, who was the caliph, would lose control over the holy Islamic places and his status as their global spiritual leader. To defend the caliphate, Muslims in India formed a Khilafat committee led by Maulana Muhammad Ali and Maulana Saqat Ali. Their goal was to restore the authority of the Sultan of Turkey as the rightful caliph of Islam. Now, this is where something very important happened. Mahatma Gandhi saw the Khilafat movement as a golden opportunity, an opportunity to bring Hindus and Muslims together in a united fight against British rule. To support the cause, Gandhi offered a powerful tool, non-violent non-cooperation. He believed that by refusing to cooperate with the British peacefully, Indians could show their strength. The Khilafat leader agreed with him and decided to follow the path of non-violence to fight for the Caliphate. This marked the beginning of a historic unity between two major communities in India's freedom struggle. Now we'll look at the nationwide non-cooperation movement started by Gandhi in 1920 to peacefully fight against British rule. The non-cooperation movement was one of the first big steps in India's fight for freedom. It began in 1920 and went on till 1922 with full support from the Indian National Congress. Led by Mahatma Gandhi, the movement aimed to end British rule without using violence. People stopped buying British goods and chose Indian-made products instead. Liquor shops were picketed and foreign clothes were burned. The main goal was to protect India's pride in a peaceful way. Thousands of ordinary people took part, making it the first mass movement for freedom in India. Now we'll look at what caused the non-cooperation movement. India had suffered a lot during World War I, and during the World War, many Indian soldiers died, and the economy became very weak. Came the Rowlatt Act of 1919, a cruel law that allowed the British to arrest anyone without trial. This angered people across the country. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre, where peaceful protesting Indians were killed, and the event made the entire nation sad. The British were also draining India's wealth and exploiting farmers and workers. And lastly, the Khilafat movement that started to support the Ottoman Empire, which brought many Indian Muslims into the freedom struggle. All these events created a storm of anger, and people were ready to say no to British rule. The non-cooperation movement officially began in 1920 during a special session of the Indian National Congress held in Calcutta. Mahatma Gandhi led the way. Why was it launched? Because Indian leaders had realized that the British would never give true justice just through reforms. And how did the people respond? There was massive support from across the country. Both Hindus and Muslims stood side by side. People burned foreign clothes and boycotted British goods. Shops selling liquor were picketed. Students left British-run schools and colleges. Farmers in places like Midnapur refused to pay taxes. New national schools like Kasi Vidyapith, Banaras Vidyapith, and National Muslim University were founded. Great patriots like Seth Jamlalal Bajaj donated generously. More than 40 lakh volunteers joined the movement. Around 20,000 spinning wheels or circus were produced. Even village disputes were settled peacefully through arbitration boards instead of British courts. Tilak Swaraj Fund raised over 1 crore to fund the movement. The visit of the Prince of Wales from Britain was boycotted. Gandhi told almost the whole country to increase support of the people. So it was a movement by the people for the people. The non-cooperation movement had both positive aspects and negative aspects. One of the major positive aspects of the non-cooperation movement was the revival of Swadeshi spirit, especially the encouragement of hand spinning and weaving, which brought back dignity to traditional crafts. Movement also worked to remove untouchability among Hindus, showing Gandhi's effort towards social reform beyond just political sense. Another big success was the strengthening of Hindu-Muslim unity, as both the community came together for a common national goal. There was also a strong push for prohibition, where people were encouraged to stop the use of alcoholic drinks, considering it harmful to society and self-resilience. And lastly, the movement saw the successful collection of 1 crore rupees for the Tilak Memorial, also known as the Swaraj Fund, which showed how deeply people supported the national cause. Now let's look at the other side of the non-cooperation movement, what we call the negative aspect. One of the key features was the triple boycott. This meant boycotting the British legislatures, courts, and government-aided schools and colleges. It was a strong message that Indians would no longer cooperate with colonial systems. There were also minor boycotts, like people surrendering the titles and honors they had received from the British. This act showed a deep rejection of foreign rule and its symbols. Interestingly, this so-called negative program led to some very positive outcomes. Since people were avoiding British courts, arbitration boards were created to help settle disputes within the community. And as students walk out of British institutions, new national schools and colleges were set up to give them an education rooted in Indian values. However, those who joined the movement had to follow very strict principles. They had to truly believe in ahimsa or non-violence and stay committed to satya or truth even in difficult times. In December 1920, the Indian National Congress held its Nagpur session, a very important turning point in our freedom movement. At this session, the Congress officially approved or ratified the non-cooperation movement launched by Mahatma Gandhi. For the first time, the Congress clearly declared that the goal was Swaraj, self-rule, and that it would be achieved through lawful and peaceful methods. This session marked the beginning of a new era. From being a group of educated elites, the Congress now became a mass-based organization. Ordinary people, farmers, workers, students all became part of the struggle for independence. Now we'll look at why the non-cooperation movement was ended abruptly in 1922. On 5th February 1922, a protest in Sorisura in Gorakhpur, United Province, took a tragic turn. Gorakhpur is in Uttar Pradesh now. Earlier, it was a part of United Province. Police started firing and it killed 3 protesters. The angry crowd retaliated by setting the police station on fire, which led to the death of about 22 policemen. This incident deeply shocked Gandhi. He felt that the people lacked the necessary discipline and non-violent spirit, calling the episode a Himalayan blunder. Without hesitation, he suspended the movement immediately and went on a 3-week fast in penance. While many Congress leaders supported his decision, some were really unhappy about halting a nationwide movement due to isolated violence. Soon after, on March 10, 1922, Gandhi was arrested and sentenced to 6 years in prison, allegedly inciting unrest, though he remained firmly committed to non-violence. Finally, on February 12, 1922, the Congress Working Committee approved Gandhi's decision officially ending the non-cooperation movement. Now, let us look at the arrival of Simon Commission and the nationwide reaction it triggered. The Government of India Act 1919 gave Indians limited control over some areas of government. This system was called diarchy, where some departments were run by Indian ministers, while the British kept control over important ones like finance and police. As promised in the Act, the British sent the Simon Commission in 1928 to review how these reforms were working. But since it had no Indian members, people say it was an insult to India's dignity. Protests broke out all over the country with the slogan, "Go back Simon." In Lahore, during a peaceful protest led by Lala Lajpat Rai, the police attacked the crowd with lathis. Lala Lajpat Rai was badly injured and later died from his wounds. In 1929, at the Lahore session of the Congress, under Jawaharlal Nehru's leadership, the party declared complete independence as its goal. As a mark of this decision, January 26, 1930 was celebrated all over India as Independence Day. Now, let's look at how Gandhi launched the civil disobedience movement, where Indians openly broke unjust British laws to demand complete independence. The seeds of the civil disobedience movement were sown in protest against the Simon Commission, set up in 1927 to review the 1919 Government of India Act. But it had no Indian members, only British. This was seen as a direct insult to India. So when the commission arrived in India on 3rd February 1928, it was met with strikes and massive protest, especially in places like Bengal and Calcutta. People called it the All-White Commission and shouted slogans like "Go back Simon, go back Simon." Meanwhile, Indian leaders were not just protesting, they were also preparing. A committee led by Motilal Nehru drafted a constitution for India. This became known as the Nehru Report, and the Congress demanded dominion status based on it. At the Calcutta session of 1928, Congress warned the British that if we are not given dominion status within a year, we will launch a civil disobedience movement. This was the final warning before a major nationwide uprising began. In 1929, during the Lahore session of the Indian National Congress, a historic decision was made. Under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Congress officially declared Purna Swaraj or complete independence as its final goal. To mark this, 26 January 1930 was celebrated all over the country as Purna Swaraj Day, where Indians took a pledge to fight for full freedom. Soon after, on 31st January 1930, Mahatma Gandhi sent a letter or an ultimatum to Viceroy Lord Irwin. In it, he listed 11 demands, including issues like salt tax, land revenue, and civil rights. It was a peaceful but strong warning. If this injustice were not addressed, a mass movement would begin. When the British didn't respond, Gandhi decided it was time to launch the civil disobedience movement. Here is what the list of 11 demands included. The first demand was ban the use of alcohol and intoxicants so that people stay healthy and do not get addicted. Second was fix the rupee sterling exchange rate fairly so that India doesn't lose money in trade with Britain. Sterling means the British currency. Third was lower land taxes because poor farmers could not afford to pay so much money. Next was abolish the salt tax because salt is a basic need and taxing it was unfair. Next was cut down military spending as India did not need such a big army under British rule. The next was reduce civil administrative cost because too much money was spent on British officers. Seventh was put custom duties on foreign clothes to help Indian weavers earn and grow their businesses. Eighth was accept the postal reservation bill so that more Indians could get jobs in the post office. Ninth was shut down the Crime Investigation Department (CID) because it was used to watch and trouble freedom fighters. Next was release all political prisoners as they were jailed for demanding freedom, not for doing anything wrong. And the last demand was allow Indians to keep arms for self-defense, but under Indian rules, not British control. These 11 demands are important from the exam point of view, so note down carefully. The civil disobedience movement officially began with the Salt Satyagraha, a peaceful protest against the unfair salt tax. It is known as the historic Dandi March. On 12 March 1930, Mahatma Gandhi, along with 78 followers, started walking from Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad. Their goal was to reach the coastal village of Dandi, which was 385 km away from Sabarmati Ashram. It took them 25 days to complete the journey, reaching Dundee on 6 April 1930. At Dundee, Gandhi made salt from seawater, breaking the British law that made salt a government monopoly. This simple act of defiance sparked protests all over India, especially against salt laws. Why salt? Because salt was a daily necessity. By choosing it as a symbol of protest, Gandhi connected the freedom movement with the common people's lives. How the movement spread. The civil disobedience movement spread like wildfire across India. In the northwest frontier province, it was led by Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, also known as the Frontier Gandhi. He formed a non-violent volunteer group called Khudai Khidmatgars, meaning servants of God, also known as the Red Shirts. Men, women, and even children from all over India joined the protest. What was the British reaction? The British government arrested Gandhi and thousands of peaceful protesters, including women and children. In protest, the Indian National Congress boycotted the first roundtable conference in London, 1930. The movement showed India's unity and strength through non-violence. To end the civil disobedience movement, Gandhi and Viceroy Lord Irwin signed a pact in 1931. It is called the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. The Gandhi-Irwin Pact was signed on 5th March 1931 between Mahatma Gandhi and the Viceroy of India, Lord Irwin. This agreement marked a temporary pause in the civil disobedience movement. Key terms of the pact were all political prisoners who were not convicted of violence would be released immediately. Any fines that were not yet collected from Satyagrahis would be cancelled. Next was lands that were confiscated from Satyagrahis would be returned as long as they had not already been sold to someone else. The next one, people living in coastal villages would be allowed to make salt for their own use. The next one, people were allowed to do peaceful and non-violent picketing of shops selling foreign clothes or liquor. In return, the Congress agreed that they would suspend the civil disobedience movement and Gandhi would attend the second roundtable conference in London as the representative of the Indian National Congress. Mahatma Gandhi attended the second roundtable conference in London in 1931 as the sole representative of the Indian National Congress. The conference failed to reach any agreement on important issues such as joint versus separate electorates and seat distribution among committees. Gandhi returned to India disappointed as no meaningful progress was made. After returning from the second roundtable conference, Gandhi relaunched the civil disobedience movement in 1932. The movement began again in 1932, but before it gained strength, Gandhiji and Congress President Vallabhbhai Patel were arrested. The British government also shut down the Congress office. The British responded with brutal repression. Police used lathis and whips freely, even women and children were beaten. The press was not allowed to report freely. Nationalist books, poems, and stories were banned. Public support began to weaken. People became frustrated and slowly lost enthusiasm for the movement. The movement was suspended in May 1933 and finally ended in May 1934. The movement still had great importance. It showed that Indian people were politically aware and active. It also showed the world how cruel British rule had become in India. British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald announced a Communal Award in 1932, granting separate electorates to various minority communities, including the Dalits. In August 1932, during the civil disobedience movement, British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald announced a Communal Award. This award continued separate electorates for minorities such as Muslims, Sikhs, and Christians. What made it more controversial was the decision to declare the depressed classes, Dalits, as a separate minority, granting them separate electorates too. This move was widely criticized as an example of the British divide and rule policy, aiming to create division within Hindu society. Mahatma Gandhi, who was imprisoned at the time, was deeply hurt by this decision. He believed it would permanently divide Hindus and weaken national unity. In protest, he began a fast unto death from jail, creating a wave of concern and urgency across the country. To resolve the crisis, leaders from the Hindu community and representatives of the depressed classes held discussions. Their negotiations led to the Pune Pact of 1932. According to this agreement, joint electorates would replace separate electorates, but the number of reserved seats for the depressed classes would be increased. The British government accepted the pact and revised the Communal Award accordingly. Following this, Gandhi intensified his campaign against untouchability. He started a nationwide movement for social reform and founded the Harijan Sevak Sangha to work for the upliftment of the depressed classes, the Dalits. This episode marked a significant step in Gandhi's journey towards social equality and national unity. 1937 elections marked a significant moment in the Indian freedom struggle, with the Congress taking an important step forward. The Government of India Act of 1935 introduced the system of provincial autonomy, allowing Indian provinces to form their own elected governments. In the provincial election held in 1937, Indian National Congress achieved a major victory, winning in 8 out of 11 provinces. However, it could not form ministries in Punjab, Sindh, and Bengal. This victory was significant as it marked a major political success for the Congress. It enhanced the party's reputation as a strong alternative to British rule and boosted public confidence in the idea of self-governance under Indian leadership. The Congress ministries resigned in 1939 as a mark of protest against British policies during World War II. Let's understand the details. When World War II broke out in 1939, The British government declared India at a war with Germany without consulting Indian leaders or the Congress. The Indian National Congress strongly opposed this unilateral decision and demanded that India be declared independent if they were to support the war effort. As a mark of protest, all Congress ministries resigned from their position in October 1939. This act of resignation was a major political step that asserted India's demand for self-rule and challenged British authority. In 1940, the Muslim League made a historic political shift by formally demanding the creation of a separate nation for Muslims. After the resignation of Congress ministries in 1939, the Muslim League celebrated December 22 as the Day of Deliverance, marking freedom from what they considered oppressive Congress rule. In March 1940, during the Lahore session, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, in his presidential address, put forward the two-nation theory, which stated that Hindus and Muslims were two separate nations with distinct religions, cultures, and interests. Based on this theory, the Muslim League formally demanded a separate nation, Pakistan. The British supported such communal divisions to weaken the Indian freedom movement. In 1940, Gandhi launched the individual Satyagraha to assert the right to free speech and oppose India's forced involvement in World War II. In August 1940, the British made the August offer to seek Indian cooperation in World War II by proposing to expand the Executive Council and set up a War Advisory Council. However, the offer was rejected by both the Congress and the Muslim League because it did not guarantee Indian independence. In response, Gandhi launched the individual Satyagraha in October 1940 as a peaceful moral protest against British war policies and to assert Indians' right to free speech. This movement, also known as the Delhi Chalo Satyagraha, began with Acharya Vinoba Bhave as the first Satyagrahi to be arrested. The British sent the Cripps Mission to India in 1942 to seek Indian support during World War II. Second World War began in 1939. By 1942, turned into a tragic global conflict, it was fought between two major alliances, the Allied powers, which included Britain, France, the Soviet Union, China, and later the United States of America, and the Axis powers, which included Germany, Italy, and Japan. As the war intensified, Japan entered the war on the side of the Axis powers and made rapid advances in Southeast Asia, posing a direct threat to British colonies, including India. In this context, Britain urgently needed Indian cooperation in the war effort. To seek support and address growing political unrest in India, the British government sent Sir Stafford Cripps, a member of the British War Cabinet, to India in March 1942. This came to be known as the Cripps Mission. Cripps brought with him a set of constitutional proposals, the most significant of which was the promise to grant India dominion status, meaning autonomy within the British Commonwealth after the end of the war. He also proposed forming an Indian Union and setting up a constituent assembly to frame a new constitution. However, the mission did not offer any immediate transfer of power, which was the key demand of Indian leaders. As a result, both the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League rejected the proposals. The Congress criticized it for offering too little too late, while the Muslim League opposed it due to its own separate demand for Pakistan. Thus, the Cripps Mission failed, leading to widespread disappointment and further unrest in India, eventually paving the way for the Quit India movement later that year. Let's look at another very important step towards India's independence, the Quit India movement of 1942. When the Second World War began, although Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru were strongly opposed to Hitler, Nazism, and fascism, they believed that India should not support the British war effort without a clear commitment to Indian independence. So the Congress offered conditional support to the British. India would cooperate in the war if the British promised full independence after the war. However, the British government rejected this proposal. As a result, in October 1939, all Congress ministries resigned in protest across the provinces. Before independence, provinces were large administrative regions in British India that were directly governed by the British under a governor or lieutenant governor. To maintain pressure on the British and keep the spirit of resistance alive, the Congress launched individual satyagrahas between 1940 and 1941. These were peaceful, symbolic protests by selected individuals to express India's desire for freedom and to oppose participation in the war without consent. This growing frustration with British policies ultimately led to the launch of the Quit India movement in 1942. In 1942, during the Second World War, Britain had an all-party coalition government. While Labour Party members were generally sympathetic to India's desire for self-rule, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, a staunch conservative, was adamant about preserving the British Empire. To gain Indian cooperation in the war, Churchill sent Sir Stafford Cripps to India as the representative of the British War Cabinet. This mission is known as the Cripps Mission. The Cripps Mission offered a draft declaration which included post-war dominion status for India, meaning India would be a self-governing member of the British Commonwealth after the war, creation of a constitution assembly to frame India's constitution. Provinces would have the right to form separate constitutions, potentially leading to divisions. However, since all proposals were to be implemented only after the war, and there were no provision for immediate transfer of power, Indian leaders viewed it as a delaying tactic and rejected the offer. Other immediate causes for the Quit India movement. First, fear of Japanese invasion. Japan's rapid military advance in Asia during Second World War created a real threat of invasion in India. Second, widespread terror in East Bengal. The fear and chaos caused by the Japanese occupation of neighboring regions spread panic among the Indian population. Third is loss of faith in British protection. Indians increasingly realized that the British were no longer capable of defending India, and the time had come to take control of their own future. Thus, the failure of the Cripps Mission and the growing urgency of the situation led the Congress to launch the Quit India movement in August 1942. In August 1942, Mahatma Gandhi launched one of the most significant mass movements in India's freedom struggle, the Quit India movement, also known as the August movement. This movement was formally initiated after the All India Congress Committee passed the Quit India resolution on 8 August 1942 at Gwalior Tank Maidan in Bombay. Key demands were: the resolution demanded the immediate withdrawal of British rule from India. Second was, it was a clear and bold call for complete independence without any delay or conditions. Gandhi's call to the nation. Mahatma Gandhi's iconic slogan, "Do or die, karo ya maro," became the soul of the movement. It was a call for total commitment, urging Indians to fight fearlessly and selflessly for the nation's freedom, even at the cost of their lives. The Quit India movement motivated the Indian masses across regions, communities, and age groups, turning it into people's revolution that shook the foundation of British colonial rule in India. Immediately after the Quit India resolution was passed on 8 August 1942, the British government reacted swiftly and harshly. British response: the Indian National Congress was declared illegal. Mahatma Gandhi and the most top Congress leaders were arrested within hours, including Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, Abdul Kalam Azad, and others. They were imprisoned without trial and remained in jail for nearly 3 years until the end of World War II in 1945. Despite the absence of leadership, the Indian masses rose up spontaneously in one of the largest uprisings in Indian history. Widespread hartals, strikes, and mass demonstrations were held in towns and villages. Symbols of British authority, such as railway stations, court, post office, and police stations, were attacked and often set on fire. Rail and telegraph lines were damaged or disrupted to break colonial communications. In several places, people declared independence from British rule and formed parallel local governments. The Quit India movement saw strong participation from across India, especially in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal, Bombay province, Orissa, and Andhra Pradesh. Some areas even witnessed temporary liberation from British control. Balia of Uttar Pradesh, Tamluk of Bengal, Satara of Bombay Presidency, Dharwar of Karnataka, Balsor and Talsar of Orissa. Means these places established parallel governments and managed local administration independently for some time. The people uprising during Quit India showed the deep desire for complete freedom and exposed the weakening grip of British rule in India. The Quit India movement, though brutally suppressed and short-lived in organized form, proved to be a turning point in India's freedom struggle. Its historical significance lies in several key aspects. The movement revealed the deep and widespread nationalist sentiment across the country. It demonstrated the people's growing capacity for struggle, unity, and sacrifice, even in the absence of leadership and harsh repression. For the first time, every section of Indian society, students, women, peasants, workers, and even the rural poor, actively participated in large numbers. It was no longer just a movement led by elite leaders. It had become a truly mass movement with grassroots involvement. The movement made it clear that the demand for complete independence was now non-negotiable. India's political discourse changed permanently. Negotiation with the British from this point forward would be only about the transfer of power, not whether India would be granted independence. The British realized that they were losing the moral and political authority to rule India. Although they managed to crush the uprising with military force, they could not suppress the will of the people. After 1942, the freedom movement entered its final phase. The Quit India movement united the country like never before. It became the last great battle for independence before India finally achieved freedom. Now let's talk about the Indian National Army, an armed force led by Subhash Chandra Bose to fight British colonial rule with the help of Japan during Second World War. After the Quit India movement was suppressed in 1942, political activities inside India almost stopped, but the freedom movement continued in different way outside the country. In 1941, Subhash Chandra Bose, who had been elected twice as the president of Indian National Congress, was kept under house arrest in Calcutta by the British because of his strong anti-British views. He escaped secretly from his house and traveled through Afghanistan, Russia and Germany and finally reached Burma and Malaya, now known as Myanmar and Malaysia. In 1943, with the help of Ras Bihari Bose, another Indian freedom fighter living in Japan, Subhash Chandra Bose revealed the Indian National Army (INA), also called the Azad Hind Force. The idea of the INA had first come from Captain Mohan Singh, an Indian soldier in British Army. He was captured by the Japanese during Second World War in Malaya. Later, he agreed to form an army with Indian soldiers who had been captured. So, while the movement inside India was silent, Subhash Chandra Bose gave a new life to the freedom struggle from outside the country through the Indian National Army. In March 1942, a meeting of Indian freedom fighters living outside India was held in Tokyo, Japan. In this meeting, they decided to form a group called the Indian Independence League, which would work to free India from British rule. Later in June 1942, another big meeting was held at Bangkok. In this meeting, Ras Bihari Bose was chosen as the president of Indian Independence League. The leaders also decided to form an army to fight for India's freedom. This army would be called the Indian National Army, in short INA, also known as the Azad Hind Force. The leaders of the league invited Subhash Chandra Bose to come to Japan to take charge of the freedom movement. After Bose arrived, Ras Bihari Bose handed over the leadership to him. Then on October 21, 1943, in Singapore, Subhash Chandra Bose formed the Provisional Government of Free India, also called the Azad Hind Sarkar. This government had one clear goal: to drive the British out of India and make the country free. Subhash Chandra Bose reorganized the INA. Many Indian prisoners of war, soldiers who had been captured by the Japanese, joined the army. Indian civilians living in Southeast Asia also became volunteers. People donated money and resources to support the INA. A women's regiment was also formed. It was called the Rani Jhansi Regiment, named after the brave Queen Rani Lakshmibai, and it allowed women to fight for India's freedom. Through these efforts, Subhash Chandra Bose turned the freedom struggle into an international movement and showed the world that Indians were ready to fight and sacrifice everything for their country's independence. The Indian National Army, in short INA, gave a new spirit to India's freedom movement. Its famous slogan was Jai Hind, which means victory to India. The INA, under Subhash Chandra Bose's leadership, fought along with the Japanese army against the British and Commonwealth forces. The battle took place in places like Burma, now Myanmar, and in the Imphal and Kohima regions of northeast India during Second World War. One of the most powerful things Subhash Chandra Bose said was, "Give me blood and I shall give you freedom." This speech inspired thousands of Indians to join the freedom movement and make sacrifices for their country. However, as Japan was defeated in Second World War, the INA also had to surrender. Their fight could not succeed militarily. In August 1945, it was reported that Subhash Chandra Bose died in a plane crash, although some people still question this and believe he may have survived. Even though Bose's alliances with the Axis power, means Germany and Japan, was criticized, his bravery, leadership, and love for India earned him great respect. His contributions were praised for awakening patriotic feelings in the hearts of many Indians. Next, creating the INA, which became a symbol of bold and militant nationalism, showing that Indians were ready to fight with arms for their independence. Subhash Chandra Bose became a beloved leader, and people fondly called him Netaji, which means respected leader. He is remembered as a national hero who took the Indian freedom struggle to an international level. Now, let's look at the events in the last 2 years before India's independence. After the Second World War ended in 1945, Britain won the war, but it was weakened politically and economically. To respond to India's growing demand for independence, the British Viceroy Lord Wavell called a meeting in Simla with top Indian political leaders. This meeting was called the Simla Conference. But the Simla Conference failed because the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League could not agree, especially on how Muslims would be represented. As a result, the political deadlock continued. There was no progress towards forming a united government. In 1946, the situation changed. The Labour Party came to power in Britain and Clement Attlee became the new Prime Minister of England. He was more supportive of Indian independence. So, to find a solution, the British government sent a cabinet mission to India. The members of the cabinet mission were Sir Stafford Cripps, Lord Pettigrew Lawrence, and Mr. F.V. Alexander. Their job was to help Indian leaders form a free, united government without immediately giving full independence. The cabinet mission arrived in 1946 to guide India towards independence. It made four important recommendations. First recommendation was India should become a union including British India and princely states. This union would have a central government. The center would control defense, foreign affairs and communication. Second one was provinces should be grouped for internal self-rule. Provinces were divided into three groups. Group A included Madras, Bombay, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Orissa and central provinces. Group B included Punjab, Northwest Frontier provinces, which later became Pakistan, Sindh and Balochistan. Group C included Bengal and Assam. Third recommendation was a constituent assembly should be formed to write the constitution. Members of this assembly would be elected. Their job was to frame India's constitution. The last recommendation was a temporary government should run the country until the constitution is ready. This was called the interim government. It would work until the new system was set up. After the Second World War, the British government began steps to hand over powers to Indians. One major step was to form a constituent assembly which would write the future constitution of India. In the elections to the Constituent Assembly, the Indian National Congress won a large number of seats and emerged as the main political force. The Muslim League, on the other hand, refused to take part in the assembly elections. They were strongly demanding a separate nation for Muslims called Pakistan. To show their stand and press for Pakistan, the Muslim League declared Direct Action Day on 16 August 1946. This led to terrible communal violence, especially in Bengal, where thousands of people were killed and many others were injured. Despite these disturbing events, the British went ahead and formed an interim government in September 1946. This was a temporary government meant to run the country until the constitution was ready. Jawaharlal Nehru became the head of this interim government. At first, the Muslim League did not join the interim government, but a few months later, they decided to participate. However, even after joining, the conflict between the Congress and the Muslim League continued. Their views on India's future were very different, and this led to more tension and uncertainty across the country. On February 20, 1947, the British Prime Minister Clement Attlee made a very important announcement. He said that India would be granted full independence by June 1948. This was a turning point in India's freedom struggle. It gave a clear timeline for the transfer of power. To manage the process of India's transition to independence, the British government took another major step. In March 1947, Lord Louis Mountbatten was appointed as the new Viceroy of India. He replaced Lord Wavell. Mountbatten's job was to find a way to peacefully transfer power to Indians within the given time. Let's look at the June 3rd Declaration of 1947 and the decision for partition. On 3rd June 1947, Lord Mountbatten made a historic announcement that changed the course of Indian history. He declared that the only possible solution to the ongoing political deadlock between the Congress and the Muslim League was to divide the country. Partition was now the final decision. Congress leaders, though initially opposed to partition, finally agreed to the plan, hoping to avoid further bloodshed and unrest. The main points of the 3rd June plan were India would be partitioned into two independent nations, India and Pakistan. Second was, a referendum would be held in the northwest frontier province to decide whether the people there wanted to join India or Pakistan. The third point was, the provincial legislatures of Punjab and Bengal would vote and decide whether their provinces should be divided. The fourth was, the princely states would be free to choose whether they wanted to join India or Pakistan. Let's understand the final step, Indian Independence Act 1947. July 1947, the British Parliament passed a very important law, the Indian Independence Act. This act laid the legal foundation for India and Pakistan to become independent nations. Here are the main provisions of the act. India and Pakistan would become independent on August 15, 1947. Second was, two separate dominions, India and Pakistan, would be created. Their constituent assemblies would have the right to decide whether to stay in the British Commonwealth of Nations or not. Third one was, each dominion would have its own Governor General who would be appointed by the British King. Fourth was, both India and Pakistan would have full powers to make and implement their own laws through their respective legislatures. August 15, 1947. So we have finally achieved freedom as a nation. Finally, the long struggle for freedom came to the end on August 15, 1947. On this historic day, British rule officially ended in India. The country was divided into two independent nations, India and Pakistan. In Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah became the first Governor General. In India, Lord Mountbatten was appointed as the first Governor General of Free India. And most importantly, Jawaharlal Nehru took oath as the first Prime Minister of independent India. This day marked the dawn of a new era, filled with hope, challenges, and the dream of building a strong and united nation. Just 2 days after India's independence, on August 17, 1947, a crucial decision was made regarding borders. On this day, the Red Cliff Line was officially accepted as the boundary between India and Pakistan. This line was named after Sir Cyril Redcliffe, the British lawyer who was tasked with drawing the border between the two nations in a very short time. The Red Cliff Line ran through the provinces of Punjab in the west and Bengal in the east, dividing land, people, and homes overnight. Later in March 1971, when East Pakistan became the independent nation of Bangladesh, the same Red Cliff Line continued as the international boundary between India and Bangladesh. This boundary, though just a line on the map, had profound emotional and historical impact, symbolizing both the freedom and the painful partition of the Indian subcontinent. In the next two slides, I have listed the important events in Mahatma Gandhi's life, starting from his birth in 1869 to his death in 1948 by assassination. This timeline table is given at the end of your textbook chapter. You can pause the video and take a closer look. So we have finished the chapter, Rise of Gandhi and the Freedom Movement of India. Thank you for watching. In the next video, we'll be uploading the answers to the questions based on this chapter. Whether it is appreciation or doubts, do leave a comment. Your feedback is very important to us. Revise well, take notes, and keep learning. I will see you in the next lesson.